What if indie games could like totally outshine those big budget games?
Hmm.
Not because of fancy graphics,
Right.
but because of something much deeper. Well, that's what game designer Reactorcore says in
Yep.
their article, Future of Games, the Next Big Innovation. And
I've heard of that one.
that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Awesome.
And get this, they say, forget chasing the newest tech.
Oh, wow.
Like hyper-realistic graphics or mind-blowing AI.
Okay.
There's the secret weapon they call design technology that's going to like change everything.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
They really flipped the script on what we all think will drive the future of gaming, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, most people just assume it's going to be about the next, like, tech leap, you know?
Yeah.
But Reactorcore's saying it's about mastering those core principles of design.
Design technology.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
So think of it this way.
Okay.
You can have all the, like, cutting-edge tools and tech in the world,
Yeah.
but if the blueprint is flawed, the
Oh.
building's going to collapse.
Right.
Design technology is that blueprint.
Okay.
It's the mindset and the methods behind, like, every decision.
I see.
From how you build the game to how you market it and update it, even how you manage the community around it.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So Reactorcore is saying that even with all the talent and the resources
Yep.
that we have in the games industry,
Yep.
this crucial element is often overlooked.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
They highlight some common pitfalls.
like what?
Well, picture a solo dev, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant, but swamped,
Okay.
trying to do everything themselves.
Yeah, I can see that.
Or the opposite,
Yeah.
a huge studio with teams that are so specialized,
Okay.
they practically speak different languages.
Ah, I see.
Both scenarios can lead to a lack of, like, a cohesive vision,
Okay.
which Reactorcore compares to performing mid-air surgery on a game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
not good.
that's rough.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to see how even the most talented developers could stumble without that strong central design vision.
Exactly. Think about legendary game designers like Miyamoto.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the mind behind Mario and Zelda.
I mean, those are classics.
Yeah. Or Kojima, known for those intricate worlds of Metal Gear.
Oh, yeah, huge.
Their games are instantly recognizable, right?
Yeah,
Because they have that, like, singular creative force guiding them.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does Reactorcore propose we fix this whole mid-air surgery situation?
Right. So they advocate for this holistic approach.
Okay.
Starts with understanding human needs.
Okay.
Why do people even play games in the first place?
Right.
What makes an experience truly engaging?
Interesting.
And then you bring in expertise from every discipline.
Okay.
You got your programmers,
Yes.
your artists, writers, marketers,
Wow, the whole team.
even psychologists
What?
who understand player behavior.
Okay.
And at the heart of it all,
Yeah.
you have a game designer,
Okay.
kind of like a master architect, creating a detailed blueprint for, like, every aspect of the game.
So someone who sees the big picture,
Yes.
how it all fits together,
Yeah.
not just the code or the art,
Right.
but the entire player experience.
Exactly. And that designer has to be involved at every stage,
Wow.
from that initial brainstorming to those post-launch updates,
Okay.
constantly iterating and refining based on feedback.
Wow. That's intense.
It's about creating a unified vision that runs through every single aspect of the game.
I mean, when I first heard about this deep dive,
Yeah.
I thought Reactorcore was going to reveal some like mind-blowing new technology.
Right.
But it's really surprising is that their next big innovation
Yeah.
is actually like a return to basics, a focus on those core principles of design.
Yeah. It's radical in its simplicity.
Okay.
They argue that the game industry, like any industry,
Right.
gets bogged down in traditions, hierarchies
Yep.
to just stifle innovation.
Yeah.
Reactorcore actually says that most game developers, for all their technical skills, are actually pretty incompetent when it comes to design.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
pretty bold.
it is.
But I can see how like a laser focus on technical mastery
Right.
might overshadow the importance of really thoughtful design.
It's like focusing on building a faster car without considering where you're actually driving it.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, Reactorcore wants us to step back and ask, what are we building?
Okay.
Why are we building it? And how will it make players feel?
Wow. So let's dive into some of Reactorcore's specific recommendations.
Okay.
What are some things that stood out to you?
Well, they talk about embracing chaos and randomness,
Okay.
prioritizing open worlds and player agency,
Okay.
and designing for modularity and remixing of content.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just theory.
Right.
Reactorcore has concrete ideas about how to put these design principles into practice.
Yeah, they do.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like in a game?
Absolutely. One of the most striking examples is the idea of designing for interchangeability.
Okay.
Imagine a game where you can just freely switch characters,
Yeah.
abilities and equipment on the fly,
Uh-huh.
creating unique combinations that developers never even imagined.
Whoa.
Wha-
I'm already picturing the possibilities.
Right.
That kind of flexibility would make every playthrough feel totally unique.
Exactly. And it encourages players to experiment and discover their own playstyle
Yeah.
instead of just following a predetermined path.
Interesting.
It's like giving players the building blocks and letting them create their own fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So they're not just advocating for better game design. They're
Right.
advocating for a whole new way of thinking about player agency and creativity.
Precisely. And they go even further with the idea of emergent gameplay.
Hmm.
Imagine spawn zones that randomly generate not only enemies and items,
Okay.
but even terrain.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Every playthrough could offer a totally different landscape to explore.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
I'm picturing a game world that's constantly evolving and surprising the player.
Exactly.
That's a far cry from the linear, scripted experiences we often see in games today.
It is, and it all ties back to Reactorcore's emphasis on embracing chaos and randomness.
But isn't there a risk that too much randomness could make a game feel unfair or frustrating?
That's a great question. That's a tightrope walk, for sure.
Yeah.
Reactorcore argues that the key is to design systems that feel cohesive and intentional,
Okay.
even if they're driven by random elements.
I see.
The randomness should enhance the experience, not detract from it.
So it's not about throwing in random elements just for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about using them strategically
Yeah,
to create a world that feels dynamic and alive.
exactly. They also talk about the concept of non-canon branches
Right.
for players who deviate from the main story,
Yeah.
instead of punishing players for going off script.
Okay.
The game could offer alternative storylines or outcomes based on their choices.
Yeah, I love that.
Right, it's a way to reward player agency without sacrificing the integrity of the main narrative.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
It acknowledges that players will make different choices
right.
and celebrates those choices.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to funnel everyone down a single path.
It's about creating a world that feels responsive to the player's actions,
Okay.
a world that feels truly interactive.
So we've talked about modular content,
Right.
dynamic UI,
Yeah.
procedural generation, and non-canon branches.
Yeah.
What else is in Reactorcore's toolbox of
Yeah.
game-changing design techniques?
So they also argue that we need to rethink our approach to sandbox elements.
Okay.
A lot of games try to contain the player,
Right.
keep them within certain boundaries.
Yeah.
But Reactorcore says we should be designing games that are in harmony with sandbox elements,
Mm-hmm.
like destructible terrain.
Oh, I've always loved the idea of fully destructible environments.
Me too.
But it seems like most games either shy away from it entirely or implement it in a very limited way.
It's technically challenging,
Yeah.
for sure.
Right.
But Reactorcore argues that it's worth the effort
Okay.
because it can fundamentally change the way players interact with the world.
How so?
Imagine a game where you could collapse a building to create cover during a firefight,
Okay.
or dig a tunnel to flank an enemy base.
That's pretty badass.
It is.
Suddenly I'm picturing a whole new level of strategic depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it creates a sense of dynamism and unpredictability
Right.
that you just can't achieve with static environments.
Yeah.
It's like the world becomes another tool in the player's arsenal.
Wow. But wouldn't that create a lot of potential for chaos and bugs?
You're right. It would definitely require careful design and testing.
Yeah.
But Reactorcore argues that instead of trying to restrict the player,
Yeah.
we should be designing systems that can handle that level of chaos.
Okay.
It's about creating a world that's robust and responsive,
Interesting.
not fragile and restrictive.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. Reactorcore is really challenging us to re-examine some of our fundamental assumptions about game design.
They are. And this next concept might be the most radical of all.
Oh, really? What is it?
It's the idea that we need to shift our focus from extrinsic motivators to intrinsic motivators.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but
Yeah.
I think it's worth diving deeper. Can you remind me what the difference is between those two types of motivation?
Sure, extrinsic motivators are external rewards
Okay.
that encourage players to perform certain actions.
Like what?
achievements, unlockables, leaderboards,
Okay.
those sorts of things.
So they're essentially a way to manipulate the player's behavior.
Well, it's not necessarily manipulative.
Okay.
I mean, they can be effective tools for guiding players
Right.
and encouraging them to explore different aspects of the game.
Okay.
But Reactorcore argues that relying too heavily on extrinsic motivators
Uh-huh.
can actually harm a game's long-term sustainability. The problem is that they can shift the player's focus away from that core gameplay experience.
Oh, okay.
Instead of playing for the sheer joy of it,
Yeah.
they're playing for the next reward, the next unlock, the next dopamine hit.
So you're saying that a game that relies too heavily on extrinsic motivators might actually feel less rewarding in the long run.
Exactly. It can create a sense of obligation rather than genuine enjoyment.
Mm.
And once the player has achieved everything,
Yeah.
there's often a sense of emptiness.
Right.
Like, what's the point now?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? How do
Right.
we tap into that intrinsic motivation?
Yeah.
That pure joy of playing?
It's about understanding what makes the moment-to-moment gameplay inherently rewarding.
Mm.
Think about a game like Tetris.
Oh,
There's no elaborate story, no fancy graphics, no rewards to
You
unlock,
press those blocks.
but it's incredibly addictive
Totally.
because that core gameplay loop is so satisfying.
Yeah, it's pure skill and strategy.
Exactly. You're constantly challenged to think ahead and make the right moves.
And that feeling of mastery,
Yes.
of overcoming a challenge through skill and strategy,
Right.
is incredibly rewarding in itself.
Yeah, it is.
So how do we translate that to other genres?
Right.
How do we make, say, a first-person shooter or a role-playing game intrinsically motivating?
It's about focusing on the core mechanics that
Yeah.
make the genre fun.
Okay.
In a shooter, it might be the feeling of the weapons,
Uh-huh.
the fluidity of the movement,
Oh.
the challenge of mastering different combat techniques.
Yeah,
In an RPG, it might be the freedom of choice,
I see.
the depth of character customization,
Yeah.
the sense of discovery and exploration.
So it's about creating systems that feel good to interact with,
Yes.
regardless of any external rewards.
Precisely. It's about making the journey as rewarding as the destination.
I'm starting to realize that a lot of my favorite games
Yeah.
are the ones that don't rely on a lot of extrinsic motivators.
Interesting.
They're the games that I keep coming back to,
Yeah.
even after I've beaten them.
Okay.
Because the core gameplay loop is just so fun.
That's the power of intrinsic motivation. It creates a lasting connection between the player and the game.
So how can developers practically shift their focus
Yeah.
from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation?
It's a tough challenge.
Right.
But Reactorcore argues that it starts with asking ourselves a simple question.
What?
Why would someone want to play this game, even if there were no rewards?
That's a good one.
If you can answer that question honestly, you're on the right track.
So it's about designing for the player who's genuinely passionate about the experience.
Yes.
Not just the player who's chasing the next dopamine hit.
Exactly. And it's about trusting the player to find their own fun. Don't hand them a checklist of things to accomplish.
Okay.
Give them a world to explore,
Yeah,
a system to master, a story to uncover.
I like that.
Let them create their own meaning within the game.
This is all so incredibly inspiring. I'm starting to see game design in a whole new light.
And we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah, Reactorcore also goes into some fascinating detail about the importance of understanding player psychology.
Oh, that's something I'm definitely curious about.
Yeah.
How do we design games that not only entertain,
Yeah.
but also resonate with players on a deeper level?
Exactly. So let's get into some of those specifics then.
Okay.
Reactorcore doesn't just philosophize,
Right.
They get into the nuts and bolts of like how to actually implement these ideas.
Yeah, I like that.
They give some pretty interesting coding and design examples to illustrate their approach.
Oh, I love it when theory meets practice.
Yeah.
So what kind of coding techniques are they talking about?
Well, they really emphasize standardized modular content.
Okay, what's that?
Think of a game like Minecraft,
Okay, yeah.
where everything is built from these simple blocks.
Right.
That's the power of modularity.
Oh, okay.
You create these basic building blocks of content,
Uh-huh.
and then you can combine and reuse them in like endless ways.
I see. So instead of creating each element from scratch,
Right.
you're essentially creating a library of components that can be assembled and reassembled.
Exactly, and they take this idea even further with the concept of dynamically scalable UI.
Okay, explain that to me.
Imagine a game where the interface automatically adjusts
Okay.
based on what the player is doing or the device they're using. Yeah.
Okay, so like if I'm exploring the world,
Yeah.
the map would like take center stage.
Right.
But if I'm in combat, my health bar and weapon stats would become more prominent.
Precisely. Or if you're playing on a small phone screen,
Yeah.
the UI would simplify and streamline itself.
Okay.
But on a large monitor, it could expand to show more information.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's all about adapting to the player's needs and context.
That's pretty slick.
It makes the interface feel more intuitive and less intrusive.
And it makes the game more accessible
Yeah,
to a wider range of players and devices.
exactly. Reactorcore argues that these seemingly technical details actually have a huge impact on the overall player experience.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier spawn zones that generate
Yeah.
not only enemies and items,
Right.
but also terrain.
Right.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Okay.
Could you maybe walk me through like a specific scenario?
Absolutely. Imagine a post-apocalyptic game
Okay.
where you're scavenging for supplies.
Okay.
You come across a zone marked on your map
Yeah.
as a potential resource area.
Right.
But when you arrive,
Okay.
the terrain is different from your last visit.
Oh, wow.
Maybe there's a new canyon that's opened up,
Okay.
or a cluster of buildings that's collapsed, creating new obstacles and opportunities for exploration.
That would keep me on edge
Yeah,
every time I revisit a location.
right.
It could be a totally different experience.
Exactly. And because the generation is based on rules,
Okay.
it still feels cohesive.
I see.
It's not just random for the sake of being random.
Right.
It's designed to create a world that feels dynamic and alive.
It's like the world is reacting to your presence,
Yeah,
constantly shifting and changing around you.
that's the idea. And it ties back to their whole philosophy
Yeah.
of embracing chaos and letting go of that need to control every aspect of the player experience.
Okay, but how do you balance that chaos with like a sense of purpose and progression?
That's a good question.
The game can't just be pure randomness, can it?
You're right. It's about creating a framework
Okay.
within which that chaos can flourish.
Interesting.
Think about roguelike games.
Yeah.
Where you have procedurally generated dungeons
Yeah.
and permadeath.
Yeah.
There's a lot of randomness.
Right.
But there's also a clear goal
Uh-huh.
and a sense of progression as you learn the game's systems and improve your skills.
So it's about creating a world that feels both unpredictable and meaningful.
Right. Players crave those what's around the next corner moments.
Yeah.
But they also need to feel like their actions have consequences.
Exactly. And Reactorcore talks about how traditional narrative structures can actually limit player agency.
They can.
They propose the idea of non-canon branches, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's like saying to the player,
Yeah.
we trust you to make your own choices.
Right.
And we're going to create a world that responds to those choices,
Yeah.
even if they take you off the beaten path.
It's about designing for multiple possibilities.
Yes.
Not just a single predetermined outcome.
So we've talked about modular content,
Yeah.
dynamic UI,
Uh-huh.
procedural generation,
Right.
and non-canon branches.
Yeah.
What else is in Reactorcore's toolbox of game-changing design techniques?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, they also argue that we need to rethink our approach to sandbox elements.
Okay.
A lot of games try to contain the player,
Yeah.
keep them within certain boundaries.
Yeah, those invisible walls.
Right. But Reactorcore says we should be designing games that are in harmony with sandbox elements, like destructible terrain.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I've always loved the idea of fully destructible environments.
It seems like most games shy away from it or implement it in a very limited way.
Right? They do.
Yeah. It is technically challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But Reactorcore argues that it's worth the effort
Okay, why?
because it can fundamentally change the way players interact with the world.
How so?
Imagine a game where you could collapse a building to create cover during a firefight,
Oh, wow.
or dig a tunnel to flank an enemy base.
That's pretty badass.
It is.
Suddenly I'm picturing like a whole new level of strategic depth.
Exactly. And it creates a sense of dynamism and unpredictability
Right.
that you just can't achieve with those like static environments.
Right, it's like the world becomes another tool in players' arsenal.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that create a lot of potential for chaos and bugs?
It would definitely require careful design and testing.
Yeah.
But Reactorcore argues that instead of trying to restrict the player, we should be designing systems that can handle that level of chaos.
Interesting.
It's about creating a world that's robust and responsive,
Uh-huh.
not fragile and restrictive.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah, what's that?
Reactorcore is really challenging us to re-examine some of our fundamental assumptions about game design.
They are. And this next concept might be the most radical of all.
Oh, there's more.
There is.
What is it?
It's the idea that we need to shift our focus
Okay.
from extrinsic motivators to intrinsic motivators.
We talked about this a little bit earlier,
We did.
but I think it's worth diving deeper.
Okay.
Can you remind me what the difference is between those two types of motivation?
Sure. So extrinsic motivators are like external rewards
Okay.
that encourage players to perform certain actions.
Okay.
Think achievements, unlockables, leaderboard.
We have those sorts of things.
Yeah, they're like carrots dangling in front of the player.
Do this and you'll get that.
Exactly.
So they're essentially a way to manipulate the player's behavior.
Well, I wouldn't say manipulate.
Oh.
I mean, they can be effective tools for guiding players
Right.
and encouraging them to explore different aspects of the game.
Yeah.
But Reactorcore argues that relying too heavily on extrinsic motivators
Mm-hmm.
can actually harm a game's long-term sustainability.
Really? How so?
The problem is they can shift the player's focus away from that core gameplay experience.
Okay.
Instead of playing for the sheer joy of it,
Right.
they're playing for the next reward, the next unlock, the next dopamine hit.
So you're saying that a game that relies too heavily on those extrinsic motivators might actually feel less rewarding in the long run?
Exactly. It can create a sense of obligation rather than genuine enjoyment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And once the player has achieved everything,
Right, like there's nothing left.
there's often a sense of emptiness.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point now?
What's the point now? Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, so what's the alternative?
Yeah.
How do we tap into that intrinsic motivation,
I don't know.
that pure joy of playing?
Yeah, how do we?
It's about understanding what makes the moment-to-moment gameplay inherently rewarding.
Okay.
Think about a game like Tetris.
Tetris. Okay, yeah.
There's no elaborate story, no fancy graphics, no rewards to unlock,
Just blocks.
but it's incredibly addictive, right?
Yeah.
Because the core gameplay loop is so satisfying.
It's pure skill and strategy.
You're constantly challenged to think ahead and make the right moves.
And that feeling of mastery,
Yes.
of overcoming a challenge
Right.
through skill and strategy is incredibly rewarding in itself.
It is.
So how do we translate that to other genres? How do we make, say, a first-person shooter or a role-playing game intrinsically motivating?
It's about focusing on the core mechanics that make the genre fun.
Okay.
In a shooter, it might be the feeling of the weapons,
Right.
the fluidity of the movement,
Okay.
the challenge of mastering different combat techniques.
Yeah.
In an RPG, it might be the freedom of choice,
Okay.
the depth of character customization,
Mm-hmm.
the sense of discovery and exploration.
So it's about creating systems that feel good to interact with,
Yes.
regardless of any external rewards.
Precisely. It's about making the journey as rewarding as the destination.
I'm starting to realize that a lot of my favorite games are the ones that don't rely on a lot of extrinsic motivators.
Interesting.
They're the games that I keep coming back to even after I've beaten them.
Yeah.
Because the core gameplay loop is just so damn fun.
That's the power of intrinsic motivation.
It creates a lasting connection between the player and the game.
It does.
So how can developers practically shift their focus
Right.
from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation?
It's a tough challenge for sure.
Right.
But Reactorcore argues that it starts with asking ourselves a simple question.
What's the question?
Why would someone want to play this game even if there were no rewards?
That's a good question.
If you can answer that question, honestly, you're on the right track.
I like that.
So it's about designing for the player who's genuinely passionate about the experience, not just the player who's chasing the next dopamine hit.
Right.
And it's about trusting the player to find their own fun.
Okay.
Don't hand them a checklist of things to accomplish.
Right.
Give them a world to explore,
Uh-huh.
a system to master, a story to uncover.
Okay.
Let them create their own meaning within the game.
This is all so incredibly inspiring.
Yeah,
I'm starting to see game design in a whole new light.
and we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, is there more?
Reactorcore also goes into some fascinating detail about the importance of understanding player psychology.
Oh, that's something I'm definitely curious about.
Yeah, it's really important.
How do we design games that not only entertain,
Right,
but also resonate with players on a deeper level?
right. So Reactorcore argues that we need to see players not just as consumers, but as human beings
Okay.
with like complex needs and desires.
Yeah, I can see that.
They believe that games have the power to not only entertain,
Mm-hmm.
but to like enrich our lives in meaningful ways.
So it's about going beyond the surface level of fun and engagement
Yeah.
and tapping into something deeper.
Exactly. It's about understanding what motivates players,
Right.
what challenges them, what inspires them.
Right.
Reactorcore talks about designing for a range of emotional experiences,
Okay.
not just excitement and adrenaline.
So more than just the thrill.
Right. They want games that make us think, feel, and even grow as individuals.
That's a pretty ambitious goal.
It is.
Can you give me some concrete examples of how a game can achieve that?
Absolutely. Think about a game like Journey,
Okay, Journey.
which evokes a profound sense of wonder and connection
Yeah.
through its stunning visuals and minimalist storytelling.
I remember that game being really pretty.
Yeah, or Papers, Please.
Oh, Papers, Please.
Which forces players to confront difficult ethical dilemmas
Okay.
and grapple with the complexities of, like, bureaucracy.
That's
Yeah,
a tough one.
it is.
Those are great examples.
Yeah.
Both of those games are incredibly impactful because they deal with universal human themes
Yes.
like isolation, compassion, and the burden of responsibility.
Exactly. And Reactorcore believes that any genre can be used to explore these deeper themes.
Okay.
It's not about preaching or forcing a message.
Right.
It's about creating a space for players to connect with their own emotions and experiences.
So it's about making games that matter,
Yeah.
not just games that sell.
Exactly. And Reactorcore believes that this shift in thinking is essential for the long-term sustainability of the industry.
Okay, why?
Well, players are becoming more discerning, more sophisticated in their tastes.
Yeah, that's true.
They're looking for experiences that challenge them and engage them
Uh-huh.
and ultimately leave them feeling fulfilled.
So it's not just about making better games.
Yeah.
It's about making games that make a difference in the world.
Precisely. And Reactorcore believes that every game developer,
Yeah.
no matter how small or inexperienced,
Hmm.
has the potential to contribute to that vision.
That's really empowering.
It is.
It means that the future of games is not just in the hands of big studios with massive budgets.
Right.
It's in the hands of anyone with a passion for the medium and a desire to create something truly special.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the heart of Reactorcore's message.
Okay?
Design technology is not just about tools and techniques.
Yeah.
It's about a mindset,
Yeah.
a way of thinking about games
Okay.
as powerful tools for expression, connection, and even social change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I have to ask if Reactorcore is right.
Okay.
And this shift in design thinking is truly the next big innovation in gaming. What does that mean for you? What kind of groundbreaking game would you create
Yeah.
if you embraced this philosophy?
That's the question every game developer should be asking themselves right now.
Wow.
What kind of world do you want to build? What kind of experiences do you want to share with players?
Yeah.
What kind of impact do you want to have on the world?
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is.
The future of games is wide open, full of possibilities.
The most exciting part
Yeah.
is that we get to be a part of it.
Right.
We get to shape this future,
Yeah.
one game at a time.
Yeah.
So let's go create something amazing.